Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Politics of. And this evening, we are doing Kingdom Come Deliverance. It's a medieval video game that was released back in 2018. It's the last video game I properly played that had a back then. This was during lockdowns during the 2020 time, and it's set in 1403 in the Kingdom of Bohemia, the Holy Roman Empire, and it's set at the time where King Wenceslav who is the of the House of during this time, the House of Luxembourg is the dominant and prominent family in Central Europe, in the Holy Roman Empire and Bohemia, and in Hungary. So you have King Wenceslav, uh, who is the heir apparent to the Kingdom of Bohemia and also the Holy Roman Empire and such. Uh, and then, of course, you have his brother, King Sigismund of Hungary and Croatia. And during this time period, uh, the into the build up to the game, there's this monologue by a older Henry, who's the narrator at the intro of the game, who talks about the kidnapping of Wenceslas by Sigismund, who invades Bohemia. He sacks the city of Kuttenberg, as it's called in game, though many commonly known by the Czechs as Kutna, which is a city quite close to Prague, and it's I would say, Mitch. I mean, it was at the time on equal with Prague in wealth and splendor.
Yeah, I believe
Uh,
it was the second largest city in the Bohemia, Moravia, in the Czech lands, because Prague was heavily built up by Charles IV, who was
yeah,
Wenceslaus' father, and thus he's known. And thus, like the people of Prague, as well as Czechs in general, will refer to him as the father of the nation in a lot of ways for that. But like Kuttenberg, yeah, the reason why it's known as Kuttenberg is Germans settled a lot in Central Europe, like Transylvania, into Hungary, Slovakia, modern day Czech Republic. So, and generally where the Germans were, because Germans would often form a mercantile class, things generally did well economically. So, yeah, that's why
yes, because
Kuttenberg was very prosperous.
yeah, I mean, we see it in the game that a lot of the characters who are merchants, whether it be in Skalitz or in the sort of a provincial town in game, which is Rati, as it's referred to. Um, the merchants in that game, Mitch, are overwhelmingly German. Um, as par with the sort of as you mentioned the historical accuracy there, um, and even the Czech characters have Germanized name like Hans Capon. You know, he's the lord, the young lord of Ratai, House of Lipa, and of course that's a Czech house, and he is ethnically Czech, but given the German influence on the region for centuries at that point, many of these Czech characters, even your main character Henry, has quite a sort of Germanized name, which was quite common at that time. So yeah, so as Mitch mentioned, the during this sort of time period, you had, of course, the before Wenceslas, you had Charles IV, who was his reign, as in game, as in and his historians would say, was a golden age. No war or conflict took part in his reign, um, and a lot of the old city of Prague that you even see today, the sort of splendor, the Gothic architecture, that largely was responsible to Charles IV. He built I believe he built up Prague University, Mitch, if I remember correctly, and he built several like noteworthy bridges, roads, and Bohemia became this. What's important is if we look at a map of the Holy Roman Empire, I just bring up the Holy Roman Empire during that time, you actually see, how uh, within the states, Bohemia was overwhelmingly the largest, and you can see why it was the sort of most wealthiest um, of that. And now, so Bohemia, Slovakia, so that was known as Moravia, the um, Margrave of Moravia, and also Silesia, which is we know as well, I guess southern Poland today. Was also included into the crown lands of Bohemia. And so it was very much a prized, it was a prized possession, and over the centuries, Bohemia would, over the centuries, the stem duchies, as they were known, like Saxony, Franconia, Bavaria, and so on, would slowly disintegrate into smaller and smaller counties, or imperial city states. But Bohemia remained that, elevated itself into a kingdom, and was elevated into a kingdom, and became the seat of power for the Luxembourg family after the end of the. I believe it was the Primosold family who were the rulers, going back to pagan times of Bohemia, and I think it was. I think it was the marriage between that house and the Luxembourgs, which resulted in their end. And ironically, it would also lead to the end of the Luxembourg house, because soon after, the Habsburgs from Austria would through marriage of, I think it's Elizabeth of Luxembourg, would go on to inherit the kingdom of Bohemia and kingdom of Hungary and Croatia. The reason I say Hungary and Croatia, by the way, is any confusion, is by that time there was a state of union between the kingdoms of Hungary and Croatia. So, whichever was the king of Hungary would automatically become the ruler king of Croatia. So, a personal union, to be precise, similar to what you would see later on with Poland and Lithuania. Mitch, have you got anything else to add on that point?
Yeah, I was going to say Bohemia was so powerful because I believe, I don't know if it was 6 or 8, but you would have these electors who would elect the Holy Roman Emperor, and Bohemia was the most powerful. Austria would gain powerful under the Habsburgs, but they weren't powerful enough because it was all messed up. Like you have, let's say, Vienna, and you have a scraggly connection between Vienna and, let's say, the western side of Russia, like Bregenz in the Alps and so on. So, and obviously the original Habsburg domains in northern Switzerland. So that was why. But then all the other electors were largely just smaller cities like Cologne, Mainz, the Palatinate, and so on. So mix that in with so on one hand you got Bohemia, who they were able to dominate very well developed land like Silesia and Lusatia, and generally Bohemia did well for itself, hence why Prague was so powerful before Vienna eventually eclipsed it. And like I mean, uh, yeah, so you have the Luxembourg dynasty who said like it kind of went out in a banging sort of way because you had it's called Charles IV, who was a great king, but is often a trope in history that you might have a great king, but those who come after him snuff it all up. Like they ruin everything, and so like the sons bicker around who gets what. Because Charles IV tried to divide it equally. You'd have Sigismund, you get given I believe Sigismund was put down as, oh, I can't remember, was it Hungary? I believe originally, uh, but then and then later on he ends up taking Wenceslas prisoner, at hostage, and just forces him to renounce all his claims on the likes of Germany and Bohemia and so on. And
Yeah, Sigismund didn't really want Hungary because the problem was the lords of Hungary weren't, um, you know, he wasn't sort of a popular figure in there. I mean, he wanted the wealthy lands of Bohemia, which Wenceslav had, and I mean, of course, this was over who gets to be the title, have the title King of the Romans and Holy Roman Emperor. And it's also important to remember there was this funny clause that you can claim or you can declare or be have your be sort of crowned king of the Romans, but that doesn't necessarily that is an automatic title of Holy Roman Emperor that can only be given by the Pope, which um, I can't I think Wenceslaus I don't think he was ever crowned by the Pope. Come to think of it.
now it's like there was quite a lot of there was quite I believe so he took the throne, for example, in 1370 upon the death of his father, and like he was crowned apparently in front of the electors at a cathedral. I believe it was a cathedral in Prague, if I'm not mistaken. But uh, but yeah, he often had to deal with rebellions, especially with the Bohemian nobility. And as the game said, like he wasn't. I mean, for example, he had problems with alcohol. He had problems with not neglecting his duties. So there's also that element of um, the authorities of Europe at the time, whether it be the nobility and the Vatican, generally not respecting Wenceslas the same way they did for other contenders, especially Sigismund, who, while he was ambitious, like because he was more ambitious, they could see he had some more sort of vitality. But even then, I mean, it was still quite sketchy how Sigismund was still he was willing to, as I like, go to war with his own brother and actually take his own brother prisoner on the altar of his ambition. So it's one of those things where quite sketchy period, I suppose. Like if you were,
Yeah,
let's say, someone in the Vatican just looking at the Holy Roman Empire tearing itself to pieces, because you got, let's say, Wenceslaus, who widely disliked by the aristocracy because he's just not seen as a serious guy. You know, he can't match up to his father, and we just see him as weak and too indulgent of a man. I mean, you've got Sigismund, who just strikes you as ambitious, not fully satisfied, younger brother who feels screwed over by the father, and so he and
yeah.
he's able to go off that. But I mean, I, I don't know where I'm going with this, so I'll pass it over to you.
No, yeah, no. I mean, yeah, Wenceslaus. I mean, he suffered from alcoholism. He was quite a scholarly mind. He was. I mean, I think one of the things the game doesn't, the game doesn't really sort of appreciate is he's shown as a bit of philanderer and an alcohol, and he's not serious. And yeah, I mean, he didn't really care much for the like governance or anything, which I think was accurate. He wasn't very good at governing, but he was a highly intelligent chap. He was interested in um, I was just trying to think what was I've got it here actually. Uh, yeah, I think it's that was it, the Wenceslas Bible. Um, so he had a deep understanding and knowledge. He was sort of into the at the time aspects of theology. Um, so there was this there was this this sort of intellectual curiosity and character there. But at the same time, I mean, as we said, he wasn't invested in governance. Um, and and also one of the trouble that he had, and he did something quite radical as a ruler, was that he would elevate lesser nobility to positions within the palace at Prague, and so one of the aspects in game, like you see in real life, is you have Radzik Kobyla, who is the Lord of Skalitz, and just for people who may not be aware that in the first Kingdom Come game that's present, you have the Lord of Townburg called Divish. You have Radzik in Skalitz, which is destroyed, uh, um, and then you have Hans Capon, and I forget his uncle, who's like his uh um guardian, who's another lord from a different county, but he's present to oversee his tutelage and education. It was at Divish.
I think it was
um
Hanush, I believe he was, if I'm remembering
Hanush,
correctly.
that's right. Yeah, and so they're all like, from my understanding of the hierarchy within King in that time in the Holy Roman Empire as a whole, they were kind of the lowest of nobility in the sense that they were above knight, but like below baron, if that makes sense. They were like so their fiefdoms are presented in game as like, the odd town, and then maybe like an odd couple villages and fields, and like your average, your sort of odd stable farm or something like that. So and that, again, common at the time. But then of course you'd have your counts, your dukes, and higher up you go, and electors and stuff. And the problem was that Wenceslas he was friends with Ratzik Kobyla. He had friends in that sort of region of Kuttenberg, because the first game is set within the uh I guess the royal lands of Kuttenberg. So the above Kobyla, you've got um, all those lands that you go in the first Kingdom Come game are actually directly owned by Wenceslaus the King. Hence why they're attacked, by why the Skalitz is attacked, because he is the direct lord of those lands. So those are, direct crown lands by Luxembourg, House Luxembourg. Um, yeah, and so I sort of lost track a bit there, but yeah. So, but yeah, these characters are lesser nobility, and they're elevated when before Sigismund's invasion. um, they're elevated to positions of prominence in the palace in Prague, and Radzik becomes Wenceslaus royal hetman, which is basically his right hand advisor. So he, Radzik, in this sort of low lord, who was given, because of his elevation, he becomes the Lord of Skalitz, this of the silver mining operation there. Um, he is one of the most powerful people in advisors, especially for a king who is, not very good at governance. He becomes a very significant figure in court for that brief period of time, and ultimately he would become, because it was a seat of the Holy Roman Empire. So you see why you have, there was this conspiracy between the German Mesian lords to the north, Jobs, who is Wenceslaus' cousin in Moravia, and Sigismund. Why there was this discontent, because effectively, I mean, we see it today. Okay, so Mitch, I'll use this example. When you had the when you had recently the Tories, for example, David Cameron, who's not an MP or anything, he's elevated to the position of Foreign Secretary, and you have like in secret, like in these WhatsApp messages, you had like a Tory MP saying, "Oh, I wanted that job. I'm higher up in the pecking order." So it was kind of like that, you know, um, that sort of mentality, and that's sort of one of the reasons why Sigismund is kidnapped, and why in the game, so Wenceslas is kidnapped, and it's why Sigismund comes in, because his argument is that there's chaos in Bohemia, and that Kobyla was, along with other allies of Wenceslas, were basically misusing the funds of the kingdom, and he becomes, effectively an outlaw. Um, and at the start of the game, and so spoilers for people if you haven't played it, is Skalitz is attacked. Well, first of all, Kuttenberg is sacked by Sigismund, which was quite a significant event at the time in Central Europe. It was a major city which was sacked, and it was sacked by his Cumans. And Mitch, can you just explain to our audience who were the Cumans, um, who feature in the game, because they're not Hungarian as such, but they at this time they're assimilated into Hungarian society, but their origins are from the steppes, from the steppe peoples.
Yeah, so McCumans originally came from, it's reckoned around from eastern Kazakhstan, and together with the Kipchaks, who were also from the same area, they formed like this confederation slash empire that stretched all the way from the Carpathian Mountains of like modern day Romania all the way to said like to their eastern Kazakhstan homeland, and yeah, they ruled over it after the Khazars were smashed in by Sviatoslav, and when the Kievan Rus breaks off and so on. They keep this sort of dominant position on the Eurasian steppe from somewhere between mid mid 11th century through to the Mongolian invasion of. I'm trying to think of a year, but I believe it was like I believe like Jibbe and Subotai with a massive recon mission in the 1224. That was kind of like the precursor to it. I mean, later on, not long after, like before the Kievan Rus gets actually smashed in, the Cumans are put on the run. And the fact that they're on the run kind of worries many in Europe because the Cumans were a real nuisance. All of you would raid into Hungary, would raid into the Kievan Rus, as well as also marry into Kievan Rus noble families in terms of like working their alliances and generally working for whatever side provided the best plunder. You know, you might have Chernigov, for example, wanted to go to war with Kiev. So Chernigov gets the Cumans on side and he says, okay, well, if you work for me, I'll give you a big share of a plunder to be found in Kiev and so on. That is all upended, however, by the Golden Horde, who later come on like the Mongolian invasion under Batu Khan, if I remember Khan correctly, in
Yeah,
1240.
yeah, he
That then,
disestablished. I was going to say he disestablishes. The Golden Horde totally wrecks the Cuman Peshek Confederacy that exists there. That's like that's sort of the end of Cuman presence really in that region, in southern Ukraine and the Caucasus region there at that time at least.
yeah, so the Cumans they fought for a time with the Russians, but well, the Russians snuffed at the Kalka River. So then, once Kievan Rus gets smashed, the Cumans they then move on to Hungary, where King Bela the Fourth, I believe he was, in around 1240 before the Mongolians invade. But big divisions because Cumans are heathens, they are Tengrists. They're being told by the Hungarian aristocracy and Vatican to convert, but a lot of them don't want to. And their leader, Curtin, ended up getting actually assassinated by the aristocracy. That then drives the Cumans mad, and so they rampage all over Hungary, especially the flat lands of the Great Hungarian Plain, just as the Mongolians arrive to smash the country in. And yeah, as part of a rebuilding program, King Bela and his successors they give the Cumans land, and still to this day, those lands that were given are still there today in terms of the names, like Kishkunshag, Lesser Kamania, and Nagkunshag, which is also
I,
Greater Kamania.
yeah,
So
I've got a map here of the ethnic where they settled, where like two particular um you had like various waves of Cumans. One that settled in like Transylvania, one that actually settled quite in like what's now like central Hungary and everything in there in like pockets. And I just want to show here. This is like your Cuman warrior. Um, just like from that time, from the time period that Kingdom Come has set. And I mean, I'm sorry, but yeah, as I said to Mitch before, the the mask, the aesthetic really goes hard. I'm not gonna lie. It just goes hard.
Yeah, it's like essential, like it's like this step version of the Sutton Hoo helmet of Anglo-Saxon forebears. So that's just what screams so hard to my mind.
I mean, what's quite intimidating though, like just purely from a design purpose here, is you can't actually see the eyes through the helmet. You can have a face, but no eyes, and that like psychologically, like for the people at the time on, you know, that's kind of like that's probably like the most terrifying. If you're like an average peasant, in like Bohemia or Hungary or wherever they're raiding, that's probably like the most terrifying thing you could ever see. Um,
Yeah, yeah, and then to mention the other Turkic tribes that they fought against, like I don't know, say the Oghuz or Bashkirs and whatnot, they all hate the Cumans because they were very ruthless, but also they would just work for whoever was the highest bidder. So they would often rampage for Europe in the same way that the Magyars actually did back in mid 10th century. So a lot of Europeans were intimately familiar with, especially like Hungarians, Romanians, Russians, um, Poles. I expect as well because their land's also quite flat. Yeah, so there was also fear factors there because quite ruthless. They'd kind of rampaging all over the place, but also because, as I said, the armor does not. The armor's self-foreign. Their language is not intelligible at all. It's not even European. Just everything about them just screams foreign and dangerous.
yeah,
Even when they convert to Christianity under the Hungarian kingdom later on, and it's actually assimilates a lot more. They're still remarked upon as heathens because they still rely upon that horse archer tradition, step nomad. Um, they don't settle down as much. They're still roaming around on the great Hungarian playing. And, well, I think like there are books that can be said of how, like with the Mongolians, that enables them to be ruthless because they just don't understand how sedentary peoples actually live. Like they just don't understand that sort of mindset. So ruthlessness, akin to what the Mongolians did, comes natural to a Kuman rampaging through Skalitz and Kuttenberg and so on. Not to mention, those armies don't really have baggage trains with them, so they have to rely entirely upon plunder.
yes. And we got a map here, and it's quite interesting, Mitch, because I was looking at this map and just kind of quick look of the modern ethnic composition of people who are descendant from Cumans, and I would say, I mean, obviously back then, back at this time when the first arrival, um, you know, there was more of a distinct ethnicity here, and of course as time would go on, till today, it wasn't really according to one of the chronicles here, it wasn't until the 1700s that Cumans properly assimilated in the sense of into the Hungarian society, where their language was watered down to just the bare basic Hungarian. And I mean, on the side note, actually, there was like Hungary was very close to becoming quite Protestant during the Reformation. There was a sort of a high level of Protestantism um, in Hungary, and the Cumans were uh, there was quite a few sort of conversions in that. But I mean, during what's quite interesting, Mitch, is that seems to be this semi-autonomous regions that have that was around where the Cumans were invited in, like the Normans in West Francia, or right back along. The Normans invited in, but under the condition that they fight and serve for their lord, their king, and also convert to Christianity, and all the other usual stuff, and basically administer like this buffer state, this buffer zone. um and I mean that sort of seems to be what, in the initial sense, um King Ladislav the fourth, also, I don't know if you mentioned it was mentioned, but he was also half Cuman king himself. He was half Cuman, or had Cuman um
Yeah, they
blood
actually call
in
them
him.
Yeah, Yeah, they call him Laszlo the Cumin as well because he would spend more time among the Cumans in terms of dressing as them. He only actually spent any time with his Christian wife. He would just spend his time consorting with a lot of these Cuman women who, if they did convert to Christianity, they didn't take it fully seriously. So the Vatican and nobility actually forced him at the end of the House of Arpad at that time in the around 1301, I believe that was. Because I believe it calls
Yeah,
for a couple of Cumans. A couple of Cumans who were paid by the aristocracy actually killed him off because he was too much of a threat in the eyes of the aristocracy. Because the thing was, the Cumans, they provided an army that the king of Hungary could actually use to maneuver against any sort of aristocratic control,
yeah.
which Hungarian nobility were known for.
Yeah, I mean, just on the fun bits origin. So, like the green part in the east here in Transylvania, a lot of those Cumans would adopt orthodoxy because of their. Uh, a lot of people think it's connection to the Vlach population. It was more to do with their Russian connections because a lot of the Cumans that settled along there were either like mixed with Russians or had served or had affiliated with Russian civil society. The yellow in the middle of Hungary here in the kingdom, middle of the kingdom here, they were the ones who were, I mean, who would technically or would you know say they converted to Catholicism or be they're more influenced by the Latin West compared to the Green, who would still be sort of with more the sort of Byzantine, Greco, Eastern Orthodox mind. Um, so yeah, that. I mean, that's the situation with Hungary here, and I mean, and also the map just shows the kingdom. So you got Croatia and Slovenia, because again, Hungary included at that time large parts today of modern Romania, parts of I believe parts of Serbia and Slovenia and Croatia. So yeah, that was your size of your kingdom. Um, on the backdrop of this, Mitch, you one of the things is like what caused this what maybe not explained particularly well in the game, probably because it's hard to maybe it was just hard to fit in for like to keep it relevant to the story, is what caused beyond the incompetent rule of um Wenceslaus and the ambitions of Sigismund, what actually caused all this discontent and chaos with the other lords and within the kingdom as a whole. And one big factor was of course the Western Schism. Um, and for people who aren't aware, that's when you have three popes at any one time. Your pope in Rome, your pope in Avignon. I think there was a pope in Naples as well. Um, and of course, because of the titles of Holy Roman Emperor being given to the popes to give away, it falls down to, well, who is the legitimate pope, and this is the crux of the Western Schism. And during this time period, you had you know in the larger Catholic world, France, of course, sided with Avignon, but then you had England siding with the um, Pope who was in Rome, and in Holy Roman Empire, it it was very much chaotic of which count or which duke backed which pope, and there wasn't really any clear vision with that, and both Wenceslaus and Sigismund, who they understood the problems this was causing, and there was many councils because this schism went on for about about was it about 20 years. Oh yeah, someone reminded me, so it wasn't Naples, it was Pisa, Avignon, and Rome. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, this schism went on for a significant time, and because of this was one of the catalysts for Jan Hus, who Mitch, do you want to just mention about Jan Hus at all?
I don't know too much about his in terms of what he was proponent of. I know like fundamentally he was kind of like the Czech version of John Wycliffe in terms of wanting reform of the
Yeah,
Catholic Church. You know, this was our time when the Catholic Church was facing a schism instead of between three popes. You know, and Wenceslaus on one hand he gave Jan Hus refuge, but at the same time, he was also like having to take a position on the schism. This was one sort of dispute why the Bohemian nobility, for example, hated Wenceslaus for a time because he just seemed to dither and he didn't really have a fixed position on the papal schism. He was just one hand he'd support, let's say, or this pope or that pope, but then he'd also be giving refuge to Jan Hus, who was causing quite a stir in his neck of the woods over um, a lot of the abuses of the Catholic Church in those days, or needs to reform, kind of like a proto Martin Luther, and um,
yes.
this was like around 1400 before Wenceslaus gets dethroned. So this, yeah. And to be fair, like I mean,
Yeah,
there was already loads of conflict. Let's say, for example, the Swabian League of a load of German cities who rebelled against Wenceslaus, who caused a lot of problems. Hence, why Wenceslaus was technically never coronated because there was always trouble every 5 minutes against
yeah.
Wenceslaus. Very unstable time in the Holy Roman Empire in those days, like from 1378 onward. And Wenceslaus made it worse by just being him, not being the best of monarchs, shall we say.
No, and yeah, of course you had we had anti-popes. You also had like King of the Romans, and of course that was Rupert of the Palatinate, and he was um, you know, Rupert never garnered enough support or strength to really um take on either Wenceslaus or Sigismund. I don't think he would have been able to take on either of those two, even um well, especially after when Sigismund captured Wenceslaus, because he would have if he wanted to take on the crown of Bohemia, he would have had to take on the might of Sigismund, which wasn't going to happen. There's no chance. I mean, in many ways, I think Rupert was kind of a spoiler, just to be a sort of thorn in the works there. Um, Looking at his sort of his role, and I think he knew. I mean, he never really took any serious actions um, to pursue that. He just sort of held that title. Um, I would say though, going back to Jan Hus, the interesting thing about him is it appears his early life is sort of a bit of a debate, but the sort of accepted view is that he came from this um some sort of rural village Bohemia, from obviously a Czech family, uh, and his name either derives from the place Hus, or because it's also Czech for goose, so there may be a connection with his family's profession. Maybe they you I don't want to say like goose herders, but he was involved in some sort of agricultural thing, but he came from some peasant background, um, and he was at a young age sent to a monastery where he was educated. Um, and this is something in Mitch that a lot of people have problems with, is that there's a lot of historians. There's a few historians who have problem believing his origin story, because they don't like they don't like the idea that somebody from a peasant background could there was ever uh, chances at that time for a peasant to be elevated and go to seminary school and be educated in Czech and Latin. 'Cause he was educated in Czech, Latin, German. Um, I think also in Moravian and Polish, but I'm not entirely sure with the Polish one. But he was educated in in Latin, at least in Czech, um, and quite well. Um, but he would then go on um, um, to uh, with patronage, I believe, to go to Prague University, where he studied theology, which he would later teach at. Um, and of course, yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, his main influence was John Wycliffe. Um, his his animating principle, though, was largely two things. One of which he never explicitly said, but if you read between the lines, you can sort of guess where the feeling was. Is that during this time, as we mentioned, Bohemia was largely there was a very large German population. Um, I mean, in Kuttenberg, for example, that Kuttenberg being Bohemia's second city had a very large German population. We of course we think about the Sudetenland, which again then would have had large German population, and but it was more spread out across across the realm. And in Prague, for example, the university, and the church and the bishoprics were dominated by Germans, German bishops, German vicars, and what have you. And a lot of Czechs were prevented from holding significant positions in the university or in religious life, though they did hold some like like town councils, city councils in the secular side, but in the sort of power sides, it was dominated by the Germans, especially in the church as well. And this wasn't, this was self-evident, and the Huss played on that. He definitely acknowledged that. But of course, during his time, the other big point was the schism, and each pope would regularly raise up indulgences, as we would which would be religious tithes of some sort, to effectively remove the other pope. And people like John Wycliffe and Huss, and of course Martin Luther would put forward that this was a massive misuse of um, religious practice, of scripture, and that this was simony. Basically, this was like paid corruption within the church. That there was this sort of top-down corruption in the church, and um, unlike Luther or maybe even John Wycliffe, Jan Hus never explicitly called for separation of a Bohemian church as such. I mean, his whole thing was reform. The separation only occurred after um, his execution in 1415, which ironically looks like it could have triggered the death of Wenceslas because of the result, what happened in the following couple years with the start of the Hussite sort of military, like a militaristic Hussite movement, which expelled Germans. You had the defenestration, of course, the defenestration. Oh, I can't say the word now, but
Defenestration.
defenestration. That's the one of Prague where these Germans would be effectively thrown out of windows like from 3 stories up. um, um, and this was the first one. There's a second one happened, I think, a century or two later. Um, and um, I mean, during the game, going back to the game, we haven't talked about the game. In the game, 1403. So this is Jan Hus is quite a young fellow still at this time, and he's starting to make a name for himself. So when you go like between, um, you go to like the village of Utlitz, and the local priest there, who's like this former warrior who's sort of become a priest, and there's like a whole mission where you get to drink with him and like have like a like an orgy with like some local wenches and stuff. But he's heavily influenced by Jan Hus, and even Henry's the character's in-game love interest Teresa talks about him quite a bit. So he's quite popular with the young. He was a very popular figure in rural Bohemia amongst the um, peasant population, um, and he was. Uh, uh, um, it was at this time a lot of his works were being suppressed by the church, though they didn't have enough. I'd say evidence didn't have enough to suggest that he was heretical because nothing he said was um, could be classed by any sort of investigator as heretical. And of course, as we know, the church was divided. Do you have anything to add on this, Mitch, at all?
Uh, I don't have much because I mean I can't. I mean I don't. I don't want to end up like stringing it out and start talking about Jan Žižka because it's out of sort of a purview of this. But
Yeah,
I don't know if the second game will cover the Hussites Wars or perhaps the precursors to it, which were quite interesting if so because there was that medieval film which was a disappointment. But yeah, it's
yeah. I mean, the
yeah.
second game looks like it takes place in and around the city of Kuttenberg itself, and also there's like they say there's like it's called there's like a map called I think it was leaked by one of the it was accidentally leaked online that there may be two maps. So you have like the map of Kuttenberg, which you'll be able to go around, and also the map of what's called Bohemia Paradise, which is, I mean, today it's this huge nature reserve in northern Czech. So, in the Sudetenland region, it borders. It's this huge area which borders modern day, or what would have been at the time Silesia, the Mesian German lands, and Bohemian Crown lands. Um, and the only reason why this was taken a bit of note of interest is the game developers, by these like left wing scumbags right back along, for them, the first game, they said, oh, there wasn't enough diversity. And the game developer just was like, we have got diversity. We've got Turks, we've got Peshmergas, we've got Hungarians, and we've got Jews in the game. That's all the diversity you need. Um, and um, he sort of I think he jokingly said, like with his second one, oh, we've added even more diversity. We've got like Poles and Germans and um, in the game as well.
Yeah, so
So
I mean,
yeah,
I I know it's like let's say for argument's sake, someone did phones like someone said, "Oh, phones of Britannia wasn't diverse," and it's not really, well, it is because I mean you've got Gales, you've got Welsh, you've got Anglo Saxons, Vikings, you've got uh yeah, you've got all manner of ethnicities. So it's like yeah, I mean to be fair, like the Warhorse gaming, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's been known to be anti-peace. Like he just can't deal with the bull crap he has to deal with from the Western media about the whole we must have diversity because yeah, lo and behold, you know there were no Indians or there were no Rishi Sunaks or there were no
yeah,
Femi
uh,
Oluwole's in like 14th century in 15th century Bohemia slash Czech Republic.
yeah. I mean the I think it was IGN or some like ridiculous journalist from that back in 2018. Because I remember like I think like like your Sargon characters at the time talked about it. There was this the IGN said, "Oh, look, there's a painting depicting like 1400 Prague, and there's like these people sitting on the side of streets who appear to be black. You know, their faces are black, and anybody with knowledge of like medieval Europe or medieval society at that time would be able to tell you, like in this country and in Bohemia at that time, they weren't black people. They were people who were ashamed of begging, which what they were doing. sitting on the side of streets, um, that they would paint their faces black so their neighbors and people wouldn't recognize them. That that's what it was, because their their faces were black, but like their arms were white. So um, yeah, that was kind of like your IGN, like, oh look, there's black people here. It's like, no, those aren't black people. Those are people in blackface, effectively. Um, but yeah, the game developer chap who's in on this, um he's very much like us. He's a massive historian autist. And one of the things that he has railed against more so than diversity stuff, Mitch, is the how the medieval world, and particularly that sort of time frame, is presented. So in that film Medieval, about Jan Ziska, which was a massive disappointment. I watched about 30 minutes of it, and then I saw the first black Bohemian, and I was like, oh, I'll switch this rubbish off. But one of the problems I had apart from that was that the in every medieval film there's always like this brown, greyish, dark color hue over it, and in reality, there was incredible colors, styles to the landscape and to the world. And one thing that Kingdom Come does is it actually demonstrates the not just architecture, but the color and the art style of like both secular and religious life. I mean, I remember when playing the game, there was this one bit where you're riding through round the main town, Ratai, and I went into the forest and I found like these pagan icons, these stumps there. For some Slavic, well, I assume it was Slavic pagan, some sort of Slavic pagan bit there. But yeah, apparently that you would still have like these odd like stone assemblies, or um old shrines, um, which were either mixed in with the Christians, or would still be have like old depictions of old pagan gods. But yeah,
Yeah, could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure it's like a Slavic god Svetovit. I think it was like a god of light or something like that, or perhaps he was the main god. I'm not. I mean, the main god was oh Perun. That was it. The main
Peru, yeah,
Slavic god was
Perun, yeah,
Perun. Yeah, yeah, I believe you. I mean, it's quite similar to like a Finnish god Perkele or the Lithuanian god Perkunas. So they have a big overlap on Thunder god being the main god in that sector of the world. But yeah, yeah, off. I'm not too fond of. I'm not too entirely sure which god it is, but if I put money on it, probably was like something like Svetovit, or it could be Yarilo, who's a god of fertility, or Svetovit, who I'm pretty sure is a god of the sun. And now Svet in Czech means light, so I either think Svetovit was like a god of the sun or just light in general. I'm not fully sure on that one, but I'm
yeah,
going off like my knowledge of Russian here in terms of because Russian and Czech are Slavic languages, so
yeah. It would have been
yeah.
similar. I mean, I recognize the Slavic gods from the wooden stump, because it's kind of like this pole which gets carved in a god, which appears to be like this sort of naked, very like ugly naked woman. um, um, and I recognize it from uh, Polish mythology. So yeah, I'm not too sure. But if you play the game, that is found in and around like forests, like roads that go around the forests. So that, don't know if that gives you a bit of a clue, Mitch, to which god I'm which of the gods I'm talking about here. But
Yeah, ugly old woman. I mean, I know. I mean, that's a common. I mean,
that's common.
for example, you got Baba Yaga, for example, who's one such character. Ugly old woman who's a witch, whose house is on the um, mounted by something like chicken's legs, I believe. That's how he's held up towards something. Just came to a tree. Just trying to think who else. I mean, you got Rusalka, which is kind of like a siren. Trying to, yeah, I'm not too sure who the old woman is in the Slavic pagan. I'm a Slavic pagan little totem, but as I said, like out in the
Yeah.
middle of nowhere, these little totems in the middle of the woods, where they can't. So you can imagine it's like could be interesting stories such as Slavic pagans hiding in the woods to escape the Christianization, or it could just be someone, or they just forgot about it and never chopped it down, akin to what happened in, let's say, Kievan Rus in Poland and so on.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is in the game you have again. I don't know how it is. The game is quite historically accurate in the sense of like the locations and everything, but you do have like your wise woman, your wise herbal woman living on the edge of the woods, between the villages um and the woods, and you go there, and she could make up potions, and she can also help you make like poison and stuff. Um, there's a mission where you can like poison horses. That was a thing. You could like poison horses. You try and poison some Istvan Toffs, the Hungarian robber baron's horses, or something like that. And yeah, um, but and yeah, and one of the women is she's accused of there's this really bizarre mission where these women are on like some psychedelic mushroom potion, and they think you're some sort of winged. Uh, they sort of refer to like devils and stuff, but I think they're referring to like a winged pagan Slavic pagan god. But then they end up like getting in the game. They end up getting attacked by like woodsmen who see this frolicking about, and they all sort of panic and attacked or something. So, but I remember that one. That was really a sort of bizarre bit in there. But it was kind of to show like the how connected a lot of the pagan aspect was still around even at that time. And I mean, I would say like compared to say like their initial conversion by 1400, again, you probably it's kind of like how we have like in Cornwall, like Darky Day or something. It's a festival, or like Padstow Fest. It's a festival, but the original pagan root of it has sort of been um I don't want to say removed, but it's largely being Christianized. The society's been Christianized to a point where the pagan aspect of it is so far removed. It's not like it was during its heyday, hundreds of years earlier.
Yeah, it's kind of
Um,
like Easter for us, isn't it? Like
yeah,
originally pagan goddess, but now it's just like been now the pagan part has been so diluted that it's just more people readily more think of the Christian side of it rather than anything to do with the original pagan side of it, with the spring solstice and so on. Yeah,
yeah, um, yeah. So that's I mean that's how it's sort of presented. I mean, with the interest, I was just trying to think, what else was I going to? We did the humans, and we've done Bohemia. Um, I I was just trying to. I was because I made a list of interesting things that I can find like on the law. Um, I mean, one thing with the character Henry, which is interesting, is again spoiler, is that um, spoiler alert, everyone. um, it turns out that his father, who is called Martin, who's the blacksmith of Skalitz, isn't his biological father. It's actually his biological father is the lord that he serves under Radzik, which of course makes him effectively a illegitimate bastard. But towards the second half of the game, because Radzik is sort of a good guy and is um, you're his squire effectively. He public. There's a point in the game, Mitch, where the character he starts referring to Henry as son, like son in the sense of, oh yeah, this is my son Henry, and that's quite a significant. There's this. It doesn't really explain, but in in sort of period terms there, that's a significant point because it's you have a nobleman who's publicly recognizing this illegitimate as his son, which is effectively his heir, his offspring, um, which for Henry is a very significant act. And I think it was a historian who worked on the game said that that would be um, that was uh, that they would he would have to make it a significant act. He'd have to do it like in front of all the other lords and of the realm, and he does it like towards the end of the game when you got Margrave Yobs and uh, the um, the Count of Liechtenstein and others who are there. Um, and so that's quite a significant moment, especially for the second game, because in the second game it looks like Henry's not. He's going to be this squire who is going to become a knight, a proper sort of nobleman knight. Um, and I imagine, if not the second one, the third one, we would get into the Hussite Wars, which is, of course, all the first one. It was the Hussites again. The Hussite conflict was foreshadowing because um, I was looking around at the real life locations like Sassau, the monastery there, Taunberg, Rattay, Ulitz, and others, in Kuttenberg, and I mean, every single town and village in the game in real life was affected by the Hussites in one way or another. I mean, Sassau Monastery was burnt down by the Hussites. Rattay became a stronghold for the Hussites um, mob. Um, Kuttenberg was conquered. There was a because when the Catholic, I guess you could say the sort of German Catholics were kicked out of Prague. Um, Sigismund took up his residence in Kuttenberg as his like I guess residence because Prague became enthralled by the Hussite Jan Žižka and the Hussite military movement. And then the Hussites would then go on to conquer Kuttenberg and absolutely it would result in a lot of Germans leaving Bohemia. Um, at that point, a lot of Germans leaving Kuttenberg and Prague. Um, so that would be interesting if that. But I think for that to happen, they would have to skip about 15, 16 years in game. I think roughly.
Yeah, it's set in 1403 when, because of 1402 was when the Wenceslaus Sigismund conflict really kicks
Yeah.
off, and then you got to deal with what. I mean, as I said, like Jan Hus gets killed off 1415, a couple of years, not long after. Like I can't remember precisely when the Hussite Wars began. I think it was like 1417 or something. That's really when things kick off big time with Jan Žižka and um, as well as like because I mean I believe the Hussites a lot of them were like lesser nobility because I mean if you were to fully believe the whole elite theory of AI, then you
Yeah.
realise there's a sort of a marriage of convenience between, let's say, the rural peasantry who felt a lot of grievances against the papal schisms and whatnot, as well as the lesser nobility who saw the Hussite wars as a chance for them to advance their own position with sort of this noble cause in honor of Jan Hus in a similar way to how the Lollards, although the Lollards didn't really have massive elite backing in the same way the Hussites did. So
No, I mean in the Hussite factions, you had the Taborites, which were like the radical. They were like the uber radical. So they were the ones who were more. Mitch, they were the ones that were arguing for, I guess, separation from Rome. That was the more radical faction within the Hussite movement. You had the Pragias, who were the more, I was going to say, they were the moderate ones based in Prague, and they made up like I guess I don't want to say middle class, but they were merchant class, so Bohemian merchants. You had the Orobites. They were again they were radical Hussites, but they were from more rural. Um, they were sort of what I was going to say they were sort of they split from the other Taborites, and I think they were known as like the orphans. That's what that was all they're referred to as like the orphans. Um, and they were more they again they were sort of another radical ones, and then of course you had Bohemian Hussite nobility who were, I mean, the nobility were people who were like the same rank as Radzik and Hans. And actually, quite interesting. I looked up the real character, the real historical figures like Hanush and I mean, Hanush died before this because the Hussite Wars began in 1419, I believe. Yeah, 1419. So Hanush died before that. I think Divish also died at roughly the same time because these characters were quite old in the first game anyway, so they wouldn't have they would have maybe seen the start of it. But like Hans Capon, for example, the real character wrote public letters supporting the Hussite movement, condemning the execution of Huss, but then he would sort of fall into line with the Catholic League, but he would be like dragging his heels about it. From what I can see, he wasn't like enthused because he was also not happy with the German influence, so he became quite I don't. He wasn't radicalized as such, but he was not fully on board. Bearing in mind, because of course his fiefdom was full of radical Hussites, so maybe he had to toe a bit of line there. Um, had to toe the line on the local reason. And Radzik, I mean, again, spoiler alert here, Mitch, but Radzik was killed by radical Hussites in a tavern in rural Bohemia. Um, um, uh, Again by I believe he was trying to uh, I think this was in the he was trying to take on a local Bohemian uh, Hussite noble. So I don't know how that will play into the game, and of course the other thing in future games is if we do come into this period where Radzik was killed, uh, what the character Henry like? Will there be a choice to side with the Hussites or side with the Catholic League, the Loyalist Catholic League? But to do that, you would be with Hans, but you'd also be siding with Sigismund, who is Henry is declares in the game as his sworn enemy because um, Sigismund was present with his royal hetman Markvart von Aulitz, who it looks like to be the main the main antagonist of the second game, who killed Henry's parents, his adoptive father, the blacksmith, and his mother. Um, so there's going to be, you know, in, I think by the looks of it, Markvart will probably be killed in the second game, given the time dates of his death. Um,
Well, the thing is that the real Markvart was a guy called Markvart of Ulitzer, and he's put down as having died in the midst of besieging Kutnahola. So, in a way, it's a slight historical inaccuracy that he's still alive when Skalitz gets burnt after Kuttenberg. So,
yeah, I did note that as well. It does appear from the game that there's going to be a battle around. I mean, when I saw the battle that or some sort of skirmish around Kuttenberg, uh, I I was wondering if that there was either two things. Either it's going to be like a flashback, or it's going to be set in the siege of Kuttenberg when the Hussites the Hussites attack the city like many years in the future. Um, Max says in the chat here, says I don't think there'll be an option. I think he will just be pro Hussite. Well, and I think he might be pro Hussite, but the problem is if he becomes pro Hussite, he would be turning against like Saradzik, Sahand, possibly Divish, who was around. He'd be literally turning on the like a lot of his allies in that. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I can't.
I wonder if it's going to be something like well put down. I mean, because I can imagine Henry of Scotland will be kind of like becoming a similar kin to Sir William Marshall in England. Like he'll just be like a well-known knight, very loyal to like several lords. You can imagine Henry's going to be similar to that in the sense that he's going to be serving several lords. He's going to be serving several causes, or let's say, like the game will give you a lot more freedom in terms of choosing which side you want to side with. So it's like a very multi-layered story whereupon you know you might you can play one save, for example, where you play full on Taborite Hussite Power 4, you can go moderate Hussite, you can go full on Catholic League, but in so doing, it's like it'll put, but then that affects your personal interactions akin to like similar to how it goes in the first game. So I suppose it's all
Yeah,
guesswork what's going to happen.
I would say there was because the game developer back in 2016 he released like um I guess like early animations of of the game, right, Mitch? And some of it didn't get wasn't included in the first game because the technology. I guess he said the technology wasn't there, and that this was like a what because originally it was going to be one game, but then he sort of stretched it out to three. And um, one thing that was rather interesting is that there was a clip, very like brief second clip of Teutonic warriors facing off what appears to be Polish Lithuanian men with their banners on this sort of open plain field, and I'm thinking of the Battle of Gernwald, which happened in 1410. So it's within Henry's, easily within his lifespan period. So I wondered if there was something to that because there were Bohemian mercenaries on the Polish side. Um, so oh, and the Teutonic side as well, but mainly on the Polish side, the Bohemians and Moravians sided with Poland and Lithuania. So I do wonder if there's like in the third game, you go off into service like a Silesian um you know this is just a hypothetical, but like a Silesian nobleman, and then you end up fighting at Gernwald. I mean, that'd be pretty cool. um,
Yeah, because I mean, that would be good to see, just because outside of like what outside of there's one film made in Poland around 1960 that shows cases about other than that, there is like Central European history is not really publicized. Like it's not really well known in our sort of neck of the woods here in Britain or in the West. And so because it's more
mm.
like but then again, you don't see a game like this going on about Englishmen serving in a battle as you call either. So um, I don't know where I'm going. I always thought like that was being more of an exile angle where you go, oh, Henry gets exiled because, like, let's say, I don't know, let's say he gets exiled because perhaps he kills off Markvart in this
Yeah,
alternate in this game, but then Sigismund is able to capture him. He exiles him. He then has to serve with Bohemian mercs at Grunwald, and he has to just fight with the Poles and Lithuanians because um,
yeah. Or there's like a hostage agreement where he has to serve under like a Polish, like in the service of a Polish lord, and and uh, you're fighting in that conflict. Um, I mean that something like that, um, because that would sort of I'm just looking up like what were the alliances on the ground there. Um, yeah, so I guess it would be Sigismund did side with, he was aligned with um I'm just trying to look here actually. I think he was more neutral, but the Wenceslaus was aligned with Poland and Lithuania. Um, it is important to note though, Henry towards the end of the first game, he has like a bit of a clear pill moment where he realizes that Wenceslaus, because he's like Wenceslaus' like biggest defender at the beginning of the game, especially against the German, like the Germans in Skalitz who are a bit rude about him, um, because it's kind of it's shown like on an ethnic divide. You have ethnic Germans who are quite pro Sigismund. He's bringing order and stability back to the empire, and then you have the native Czechs who are like, no, Wenceslaus is our guy, and Sigismund is a cruel tyrant, and all that sort of stuff. Um, and collaborates with heathens. That's like the biggest thing. But at the end of the game,
Yeah,
Henry's
can you
like,
imagine? I don't. Sorry to interrupt. You reckon that's going to be you reckon that's going to be something that cause tensions in the game as well, where let's say you get the Germans, because theirs naturally seems more mercantile. They're just seen as, oh well, it doesn't matter like if like which side wins, because they always have business. So let's say Sigismund wins, the Czechs will see them as just disloyal section of a population, and so like that'll just cause ethnic tension akin to what happened to the Hussite wars where the Germans get chucked out. But like you just have, yeah, you can imagine I don't know, you can imagine Henry also having to be this sort of arbiter between, okay, on one hand he's got German mates, or he knows Germans, and of course that area of, I mean, 21st century was the same all over, where everyone spoke German, so there was that. But
yeah,
yeah, you won't.
and it's definitely because again the map that is suggested in the game, Henry would be traveling through villages and towns if it's what they call Bohemia Paradise. It would be like at that time those towns would be explicitly ethnically German. Those would so that he would be interacting with German people who probably were more loyal. Well, who were more loyal maybe to like Rupert or Sigismund than Wenceslaus, or the Mesian lords. So there may have been they wouldn't he would. But I mean, at the end of the first game, he actually is questioning. He's like, there's this bit where he goes to Sir Radzik, his father, and says, "Is this all true?" When Jobs is saying about like the incompetence of Wenceslaus and all the sort of like shit he got up to, and he's like, "Oh, is this true? Like Wenceslaus is like a complete dope who doesn't know what the hell he's doing." And like Radzik, because Radzik is friends, so like on a personal level, he was friends with Wenceslaus, and he's like, when Radzik says to Henry, uh, "The king is a good drinking companion, and in like conversation." But he's not good as a decision maker, a ruler, or anything else like that. And that's his great. And he says that's why I was present to advise and all that sort. And so there's this there's this point where Henry's like, oh, I don't want to die for like this incompetent monarch. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, because you also got Hanush as well, who's like of that similar disposition, where he'll even just say to like Radzik, "Oh yeah, Radzik kind of invited all this trouble down on his head just by being like a drunkard, unsuitable king." Like
Yeah,
I mean, because I know, I mean, it's also like another thing was he didn't really focus on, he didn't make any children, like he didn't have any children either. So it's also like after he died, like he was just, Rome got thrown into more chaos. So alongside, failing his duties to do like as they rule the realm beyond, getting interested in the Bible and scripture and that sort of stuff. He also doesn't do the most basic role of like getting an heir to the throne, but also he also can't mend papal schism. He's seen as a guy who just hip hop um hops all over the place, just never feeling quite sure of what to do. Because as I said earlier, it's like a common trope, isn't it, where Charles IV was a great king and a great Holy Roman Emperor, but then his sons just don't match up to him. You got Sigismund as well, who he only has a daughter, and similar to what happened with Burgundy after Charles the Bold, um, everything just disintegrates.
Yeah,
Or rather, for the House of Luxembourg actually ends up dying out, but they just get eclipsed by the Habsburgs, who swap from Prague to Vienna, and the rest is history, as we say on that aspect.
yeah. Another thing we forget to mention, which is heavily referenced in the game, is what happened at the Battle of Necropolis against the Ottomans and the I guess you could say the expansion of the uh, Ottoman presence in the Balkans, which the defeat in Necropolis was a opened up Ottoman rule in Albania and Serbia and Bulgaria and sort of consolidation in in those regions. And Sigismund, I, let me just bring. I think he was leading, or he was one of the leaders of the um uh,
Yeah, he would have been in
the
charge of the
Crusader
Holy
Force.
Roman Empire's contingent, yeah, because he would have been in charge of the HRE's main component. Because you got because you had, HRE and Hungary were technically separate, but given they were ruled by the same guy, I mean, you can imagine Sigismund would have had to been was at the battle itself. I can't remember what role he took precisely, like if he was, he was giving up the orders, or if it was a case of he was there as a figurehead, but not exactly making the decisions, or like making up with the initiative, but rather um, doing what advisors told him. I don't know on that side of the battle as far as Sigismund was concerned.
Sigismund. I got a chronicle from was it Jean Forest, who's a chronicler, and he basically said that Sigismund, because they lost the battle quite spectacularly. And this was like the coalition. This was a coalition of Holy Roman Empire, largely French and Burgundy, along with Croatia, and then like your various Knights Hospitaller and Teutonic. So you had contingents from all over, but there was a large German and French presence, and Sigismund would state the reason why they lost was he says Sigismund says we lost the day by pride and vanity of these French. If they believed my advice, we would have had enough men to fight our enemies. What happened was I believe during the siege the French just straight up ignored Sigismund's command and authority, and decided to lead like cavalry charge, which then was fatal. And the army, I believe, the army was split, and that sort of led to the defeat. And yeah, Sigismund straight up blamed the French for the defeat. He was straight up um, publicly said the French were the reason why the Balkans in Christendom was put under threat and everything.
Uh,
It's
to be fair, you given the French at that time period of during the Hundred Years' War, how they behaved against us at battles like Crécy, Poitiers, and Agincourt later on. I mean, you really do have a sense that Sigismund was actually correct in the whole sense of French hubris and
yeah.
over overestimation of their own cavalry's abilities against foes, whether it be the English or the Ottomans, who the Ottomans had their own tactics for dealing with heavy cavalry from Western Europe. Because they had to deal with the Byzantine cataphracts, so they were fully well aware of how Europeans fought. So
Yeah, quite a lot of the French nobility like joined the Vin and others. It was like were killed or taken, and there was a few taken prisoner, but a lot of the French nobility were killed in that battle. Um, Again, Count of Eu as well was taken. Blame. The thing is, they actually blame Sigismund because when the battle was obviously defeated, him and the Czech and Hungarian forces quickly left because they realized, I guess the field battle, the siege was lost. They were besieging Necropolis, and yeah, they it was quite clear they lost the battle. Um, but um, I mean, in the game, it's referenced a few times. You come across several characters who are present. There's one character who helps build the trebuchet for the siege of Talmberg, who's voiced by Brian Blessed, who was a real the character again was a real engineer who was present at Necropolis. And it's funny because Brian Blessed's character sort of says, "Oh yeah, we had a plan and the French really fucked it up." So yeah, I thought that was quite fun. Like every character you come across who was involved with that is like, yeah, the French ruined it. Um, so
Many such cases.
yeah, but I mean, yeah, that's I mean, that would be a good flashback, scene, uh, to show Necropolis or something. Uh, um, but yeah, I mean, of course, the decline of the House of Luxembourg, as you because I don't Sigismund didn't have he had a female heir, didn't he? He didn't have I don't think he had any male heirs or
No, you just said
um,
about Elizabeth woman who
Elizabeth.
was just
Yeah,
queen consort, but I mean, any children she had were, I
well, she
think
married.
they were Habsburg, I
Yeah,
believe.
she married Albert. Uh, I think it was Albert, or Duke of Austria, who was of course Habsburg, and then of course the Habsburgs would then well he would later on, and then subsequently they would later on be the sole title holders of Austria, Hungary, Bohemia, and of course King of the Romans and Holy Roman Empire. So at the end of this saga, the Habsburgs would rise and replace the House of Luxembourg, just by pure marriage, and also two brothers warring with each other. And I've got a book here called The Habsburg Way, which is by Edard Habsburg, who is a friend in our community. He's been on. I think he's like Nathan. He's been like around Nathan Hood and Connor, who I stream with every now and then. He's the Hungarian ambassador to the papacy, um, or the Holy See, I should say, and I got his book here about the you know uh, how to be basically how to be a good Habsburg, but also the origins of the Habsburgs, and yeah, it's basically just have lots of children. That's one of the main rules. Have lots of children. Um, which yeah, again, true. Uh, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
anyway, the um,
yeah. I was going to say, with Elizabeth of daughter of Sigismund. I mean, she only has one son, and that's Ladislaus Posthumous, who, he's kind of like, yeah, he's. I mean, he dies young, but the thing was that he was kind of a harbinger in a way of Habsburgs getting more powerful because he had a claim to the Hungarian throne as well as to bow to Bohemia, and so he's kind of a harbinger in a lot of ways for Habsburgs later building up their empire. So the House of Luxembourg in its dying breaths kind of did more to build Habsburgs than pretty much anyone else in a way.
oh yeah, straight up, and of course, one of the Habsburgs appears at the end of the game because at the end of the game, there's this meeting. You have Jobs, you have who's the cousin of Wenceslaus and Sigismund, and originally he was the one instrumental in helping Sigismund overthrow Wenceslaus, and then at the end of the game, he's like, "Oh, actually, I want Wenceslaus back, and I want Sigismund out." So he does like a complete 180 turn. You then have his vassal, which is the Count of Liechtenstein, who again in the game he's presented as kind of this like Machiavellian sort of I don't want to say like Wormtongue style character, but he has like the same like black clothing as Wormtongue. So every time I see him, I think, oh, Guima's turned up and is sort of sort of spreading a bit of mischief. And then of course you have I believe it's one of the Habsburg. It may be Albert or it could be Rudolph. I can't remember but there's one of the Habsburgs who's also present. Um, who's basically there as uh, getting a feeler out for the mood because the at the end of the first game they want your character to go to Berkov Castle to meet with the League of Lords of Bohemia, or one of the League of Lords of Bohemia to basically say, listen, the situation is that Sigismund is using his heathen army. He's already sacked two, the city of Kuttenberg and Skalitz, and basically that this has gone too far. We need to have stability back in the kingdom. Sigismund can't deliver that. We need like the League of Lords to free. We're going to free Wenceslaus, and we're going to help the king govern. Is basically what they said at the end of the game here, and we're going to kick Sigismund out. And Yops said, "Oh, I got like the lords in Hungary. We'll get them to start, but basically start a rebellion." So Sigismund has to return, and Sigismund did have to return to Hungary for a rebellion, several rebellions throughout his time. Um, and the interesting thing is one of the way that the reason why the Bohemians turned against Sigismund was because of the tactics he used. Because in Hungary, to put down rebellions in Hungary, he would use his Cuman forces, and that would be quite effective. But when he tried that in Bohemia, it was I guess you could say a more civilized land and civilized people. It's seen as more barbaric, if that makes sense. Um, it was more of a barbaric act than anything else. Um, so yeah, well, Mitch, you got anything else to add at all?
No, I think I've pretty much said everything I can think
Yeah,
of over this year.
I think we might wrap it up because we've done it. We've come up to 11, so we've done quite a good bit of segment on this. Just to Max Cataract in chat here. I wonder if the third game might end with the Crusade of Varna. I mean, that was in 1444, I think. So Henry would be. Um, I don't know because Henry would. Well, if he lived to like maybe like his late 60s. But given the time period, that's unlikely. I mean, like Hans Capon, I think he dies, like the real Hans Capon dies in the 1420s. Uh, so, I mean, we do know that Henry, by the sounds of it, lives to because he's the narrator in the first games, and it sounds like an older man. So he lives, I guess, into an older age. So it is possible. Um, but um, epilogue could be one of maybe like Henry's children or something. Maybe he has a child or something. But if I'm absolutely honest, I think if I was to be absolutely honest, I think the third game would involve the Hussite Wars. I think that's is where it's all leading up to, and I reckon the third game you'll have the war wagons, you'll have like literally the whole like Jan Ziska. It's going to be like all of that stuff, and it's going to be this epic clash with Sigismund and um everything. Um, though I will say, I bet um, Henry will either meet or will meet Jan Hus in the second game at some point. That's my prediction, Mitch. I reckon he will meet Jan Hus because Jan Hus at this time was there was several points where he was kind of kicked from the university, and he would go into he would regularly go into the countryside and go around like odd towns and villages preaching. Um, so I can definitely see
Yeah,
like a I could definitely see
yeah,
like a yeah
yeah. Because you get that one. Was it a mission or just like a regular task where you had Henry delivering a sermon? So you want to like that
yes
was just kind of building up to it. I can't remember. Yeah, and then you also got that one bit where he's getting drunk with a priest. So I always thought that was a harbinger of clearly there's something going down with the church. I don't know, like Hussite wars eventually break up. So perhaps Henry. I'm get. I'm get. I'm guessing someone. I'm guessing something big is going to go off with Henry towards the church. Let's say he goes full on Hussite, or at the very least he meets with Jan Hus, and then he gets that sort of, and then you get that sort of option of siding with Jan Hus against the church, or siding with the church against Jan Hus, depending on
yeah
how you navigate through it. So
yeah. I mean, during that mission when he's in Ulitz, he has to hunt. There's actually I forgot to mention it, but there's a mission where the priest of that particular priest he gets drunk with comes to him and says, "Listen, the Inquisitor." The Inquisition has arrived, and it's some bishop of bishopry in Moravia, and he's an Inquisitor, and he's from like this clan. It's called Clan Hare, which one of these you had like these families who were like church families, so they were nobility, but they mainly operated in church, and they were. They're referred to as Clan Hare, which, from like looking at historical records, I can see, um, they seem to be just like your Borgia family, but in Moravia, sort of just a pure church family. And in this they're hunting Waldosians. I'm not sure though, because I was a bit sus with like the historical accuracy of this. I mean, it is possible, but from my understanding, Waldosians were more likely to be found in like Switzerland, northern Italy, and mainly in urban centres than rural settings. But I mean, I guess it is possible they were at that time. You had like the odd Waldosian um, family or what have you that moves that you know in Germany and Bohemia, but yeah, there's this mission you have to do like reconnaissance and spy on them, and you find out that the woman of the house is leading the prayer, which of course is blasphemy and all that, and that uh, you can like report. You can go straight to Inquisitor and have them executed, or you can try and convince them to leave and tell them, and then give the bishop the runaround, the Inquisitor a runaround. And then you meet another Inquisitor because one of the girls from Skalitz, um, she has like the visions from the Virgin Mary, and she starts preaching. And then this Inquisitor turns up, and there's this whole trial. And I mean, Henry he actually becomes quite friends with like a lot of the Inquisitors in the game, Catholic Inquisitors. So yeah, maybe he'll be like, because there's like a bit where he says like the Inquisitor says, "Oh yeah, the church will take note of how big supporter you are, Henry, or how you helped us, rooting out heretics." Uh, so, so yeah, I don't know what the future, but um, yeah, I think there will be I think Henry will probably go Hussite, to be honest. I think he'll. I can't see him siding with Sigismund in the future.
yeah, it's not just that. I mean, it's the whole underdog trope as well. Like, oh yeah, because the Hussites, they're all they're fairly all by themselves against the full might of the Holy Roman Empire, and
Yeah,
they're able to win battles. I mean, Jan Žižka, for example, I'm pretty sure he was blind, so that even puts even more um, wind behind the sails of the whole underdog narrative with the Hussites. So you can imagine that's what they'll do with Henry. Like they'll just say, "Oh well, Henry's going to become a Hussite. He's going to become mid-rank officer or something like that. Let's say, or you can climb up the hierarchy and you also get to do a load of missions. Like, let's say, I don't know, you get to do some. I don't know. I won't be surprised if just rub the noses in like IGN types. They'll just do like some spicy stuff where Henry gets to do some spicy stuff to some ethnic minorities or whatever, like the Germans, like or whatever. Then again, that's I don't know. That can be lots of a culture thing or not, depending on your perspective. But yeah,
Yeah, could you imagine that? You're like Henry rocks up like in Poland, and like the Duke of Silesia says, "Listen, you got to go to the ghetto because they're, I'm in debt. I'm in a lot of financial debt, but we're gonna have to wipe the debt clean, Henry. Oh, yes, my lord. Should we pay them back? Well, we're not. No, we're not paying them back, Henry. We're gonna do it the old-fashioned way." um, I mean, oh no, could you imagine that? I think that would be. I don't think they would do that. uh,
now I mean, to be
no,
fair, Steam will please sell anything, so I don't think there'll be a problem with Steam selling that. To be
oh yeah,
fair,
maybe like mods or something. Sort of Project Shylock or something. um, but
110 times.
yeah, it's 110 times. There's like a speech check with Henry saying, "Are you trying to tell me that you guys are the victims 109 times?" Hmm. Yeah. Um. Though in all seriousness, though, um, I was actually just looking here. Now, there's a stat which it seems to be like the agreed historical narrative here that during the start of the Hussite Wars, 90% or there and thereabouts of the Bohemian population were on the side of the Hussites, which is quite extraordinary in actual like numerous sense. And this was largely because of the execution of Jan Hus really angered a lot of even Bohemians who weren't, I guess, fully on board with him or weren't really interested in what he was in what he was doing. But it was kind of like the it, it many of them felt it looks like it because the retaliation was targeting Germans. I mean, it wasn't like other Catholic. It wasn't like Catholics in general, like in the Protestant Reformation. It was Germans. So this definitely seems like full on. We talk about ethnic conflict. I think the ethnic conflict might just be between Germans and Bohemians and Czechs and Germans. Um,
Yeah, but you can imagine. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how they would moderate stuff. Because on one hand, yeah. I mean, the Czechs did also the same with after World War II, so perhaps they've got a different historical memory of it. But I mean, I don't. I mean, you can imagine it'll also be similar to the Bosnian War, where everyone knows one another. So it's like, oh yeah, Henry's been asked to turf out Germans that he's known since like childhood or whatever, and he just opens himself up to some spicy conversations or something. Or oh yeah, you might get you know,
yeah,
like it'll just be like a Central European version of a Bosnian War or some or Kosovo, where
yeah. Well, I mean, in the at the start of the game when he's in the Scalets before the in the tutorial section, him and his friends who are this is what's quite confusing because you have like his friends called like Fritz and I forgot the other name of the Matthias and stuff, and again like quite some of them got quite German sounding names but are ethnically Czech. um but there's like this family of Germans who sound different, so I think they like moved into the area, you know, fairly recent, like within like a couple generations, and they called them like the Deutschens, like they just call them the Germans, and they taught, and one of them is like saying, "Oh yeah, King Wenceslaus is a drunk and competent," and so angered by it, you and your friends can like you have to like chuck he painted his new house white, his like new cottage white, and so you lure his wife away, and then you chuck like shit all over his house.
I remember that. I remember that particular
Yeah, and oh,
part
yeah,
of
and
it.
then you
Yeah,
beat up, and then you beat up his child or something. So, I mean, Henry has like committed um sort of culture, what Bowden would call like cultured thuggery before. So yeah, he's committed that sort of stuff. But yeah, um, but base Teutonic DLC. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think Henry would join a monastic military order. That'd be a bit out there. Even the Teutonic Knights. Um,
Well, I mean, Teutonic Order is largely just a Germanic thing. I mean, I'm pretty sure it largely was just Germans. I think there was some English. I don't know about Normans or French, but I mean, Teutonic Order is just it's very sort of everyone just acknowledges it as, oh, it's exclusively German. Like Germans just taking land because I mean, because originally hired by the Poles, like by Mazovia, but then they
Masovia, that's
decided,
right. Yeah.
yeah, they decided to stay, and well, then they later morph into Prussia, and then later morph into a spicy mustache man later on in terms of the sort of historical mission of Lebensraum in the East. So, so yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
and
for Henry as a Czech, like as a Western Slavic fella, it just doesn't really fit the mold. It
well, I
would
mean,
just be
he'd be like fighting like all the other Slavs. Would like be you like full on like sort of like traitor, I guess they would have even the mercenary. I mean, yeah, largely Germanic. I mean, by this time though, the Teutonic state was kind of largely redundant because Lithuania had already converted to Catholicism in 1386, I believe, through the
yeah,
marriage
Queen that Queen Jadwiga, I think her name was that Polish.
Yagislaw or something like that, and um, yeah, and you had the Duke of Lithuania, and there was a marriage. And in that, yeah, he became king of Poland, and um, Lithuania, the duchy, the Grand Duchy, as it was of Lithuania, became a Catholic. Even though that most of their vassals, especially in the east, like Smolensk and um, parts of Ukraine, were Orthodox, and a lot of Lithuanians were Orthodox Christians as well, which they remain. But the sort of pagan aspect was they that was more direct to them. But the Teutonic Order would like the Teutonic state and the knights there would say, "Oh, this is a ruse. They're not really. They're secretly practicing paganism." And there was this whole thing of like this region of Lithuania that borders the coastland. I forgot what it's called. It's called
Samagitia.
Samagitia. That's right. And there was this whole deal with the Teutonic Knights in 1415, where they said to they reported, there's still pagan practice going on, and it was basically like a couple people in like rural woodland who were still pagan, but they were kind of like referred to as like Europe's last pagans, and I think by the 1420s it sort of that practice had gone by then. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, that particular region, they were, yeah, pagan. It was documented they were pagan, but they were, um, was Max. Yeah, well, the problem with that though is the Teutonic Knights. They did like spurg out towards the end. They sort of became a bunch of spurgs, and that's unfortunate, But I mean, yeah, and then of course they would, you'd have the uh, modern state of Prussia with the you know, Brandenburg, and then you get what was it, the Prussian ethos, as it's called, which a lot of Germans in the East still today refer to. They still call it the Prussian mindset. I've heard a German talk about that. You have the Prussian mindset, and the Prussian mindset is basically like a uh, quite nationalistic and martial in nature.
Yeah, because I mean, East Germany wasn't fully devastated of. It was just a simple matter of a folkish sort of spirit just molded more into communism, whereas in the West it was just completely gone. Everything just individualized in the West of Germany. Hence why West versus East are so different. However,
Yeah, I mean, I always do you know what I always think when someone says about like wokeism or or like East versus West, like communism and capitalism and all this sort of like boomer narratives around it. I always think about this image, this particular one, which is a famous one. You got like the liberal, unwashed, individualistic masses, like all like dirty and scruffy, like Americanized, westernized, who are completely, been brought up to hate their own civilization and culture, wanting to shake hands, look at the Chad East German like Prussian mindset, looking at them with absolute disgust. I mean, yeah, that's an incredible photo. Yeah.
yeah.
So I mean that's why I sort of go back to. Anyway, I think that's it. Um, um, I think we talked about Kingdom Come and the events around it. Be interesting to see what happens in the second game. Um, and yeah, I guess Mitch, you're on. Have you got anything to shill before we head off?
Nah, not for me.
No. We will. People will know us from Iron Duke's Splendid Isolation, usually every Saturday evening. So that's where you'll find us. And but apart from that, everyone have a good night, and I'll see you all on this channel. I'll see you on Thursday. We'll continue our Richard Hilton stream with Connor. That'll be on this Thursday at 9 o'clock. But until then, good night, everyone, and see you next time.